until you need the money to ask for it. Ask for the money when you don't need it, because then you can dictate your own terms. You're not desperate, and if you don't get it, that's okay.
So measuring profits is relatively easy. There's a balance sheets, income statements. It's a well-defined science. Measuring impact is really hard. So how do you guys handle measurement? How do you feel about measurement? How do you set your metrics? This is I think the biggest challenging factor for all social enterprises. So what do you guys do on that front?
Well, in our case, we had actually an investment partner for early stage for some of the systems that we built, the solar systems that we built, where part of their criteria was, hey, you're going to actually tell us how much you guys are saving on GHG and greenhouse gases and whatnot. So that was one way that we actually tracked things. Ultimately, kind of like through the course of our business, I think there were two things that we measured. They weren't scientific. One was that we helped about 5,000 homeowners go solar, get panels up on their rooftops. About 20% of those were people that probably couldn't have afforded it otherwise, except because of the way we designed the program for them. And then secondly, which the other thing that I was kind of proud of and that we measured were the number of new careers that we launched, and actually steering some of these people going into new careers into a business that happened to be in kind of renewables. So just to close the story, our company was acquired in 2014, so things certainly have changed since then. But what I've noticed and observed and I'm happy about were where these people have gone on to, because they started their career in a renewable sector, and many of them are continuing that path, either with the acquiring company or with others.
Perfect.
So we are not yet operational with our biogas plant, but I sometimes think about the impact measurement being very simple, because we're diverting X tons of waste, which, if it were to go to a landfill, will result in, Y tons of greenhouse gas emissions. It's about almost a 0.8 to 1 ratio there. And so, certainly we're going to look at that number. But with what you just said there, I think, I wasn't fully thinking about that. But we've been really attracting a lot of young people to our company since we started, and to think about, that impact you caused just by launching a career. That's something I'm excited to measure a bit more in the future.
Yeah. Awesome.
So we have a really tangible way of measuring our final impact, whereas iron deficiency is this massive global problem. The World Bank estimates that you'll lose 2 weeks of work a year if you're in a developing country. So it's 2 weeks of work a year from income. The employer loses 2 weeks from economic contribution to the economy. There's the health impact. So we have a metric that we can do. If you are not iron deficient, how are we benefiting that community? But again, because we want to have this social impact in everything we do, we can expand on that, where we know how many people we employ with our packaging, how many people we employ with our distribution channels. And so one of our main funders, Grand Challenges Canada, actually asks to see the overall impact of our entire supply chain. And so we have this, it's been very difficult to develop, and it's always changing, but we have a formula that we can actually say for the overall contribution that Lucky Iron Fish has to the global economy. And I think that more and more companies should be looking at their overall contribution, because if you just focus on the end product, that's great, but you are getting it there in a positive way as well. And you shouldn't underestimate the channel that you're using to deliver your final product.
Right. Now, Amy, you have, your business is basically building better people. How do you measure that? How do you decide this kid is now more empathetic? Nicer. How can we tell this kid's a nicer person having gone through your program?
Yeah, it's something that we have been talking a lot about. So how do you measure that impact? And we started playing around with tools. So how do we equip teachers with measuring that impact even? So I don't think it's a really tough thing. In the industry, we've met with researchers, we want to do it right. And so we're starting to experiment. We're starting to work with researchers. But our initial stake was we can give indicators to teachers about how students are progressing through understanding these topics. And then how can you look at it pre-post? But at the end of the day, for example, our early feedback was the usability wasn't easy, so the teachers didn't want to input into it. So you have to make it, there's a lot of consideration. I think it's something that's going to continue to evolve, but it's also really exciting. So as you use technology, imagine like if teachers are able to easily input and gather those kind of insights as a school or a district, you're able to see how your students are progressing in understanding these like really essential life skills at the end of the day, and how this is helping them and correlating to academic performance or other life kind of measures. And there's tons of research that shows that this type of learning does that. And so as we develop that, in the meantime, what we are looking at is like partnering with researchers to understand the efficacy of our program. So how does this, as schools use our program, how does this result in certain progress in terms of pro-social behaviors? How can we kind of package this and make sure that a school can feel assured that this program continues to deliver those results?
Awesome. Yeah. Bernie, on the investment side, because you've had experience as a VC, as an angel, so what are the criteria you look for from an investor? What were the things you were looking at? What were the warning signs that would pop up that would sort of make you hesitant?
So I think they're different from an angel perspective and from a venture capitalist perspective. And different, I mean, there's lots of different shades of VCs and what they're kind of looking for. So I'm going to be very generalist here. So what we call venture capitalists or early stage equity providers generally are people that are managing money on behalf of other institutions, and they're just trying to generate a strong financial return. The IRRs are supposed to be 25%. What does that mean? It's probably like, if they put in $1 million, they're trying to get back between $5 to $10 million. And because of that, they're looking to invest in companies that have trajectories that are like this, that have, a strong potential exit value. As a result of that, there's a very small subsectors of all businesses that they tend to look at, and they're primarily in 3 verticals. I mean, you often hear information technologies, in healthcare, and in clean technologies are kind of like the 3 verticals that they tend to invest in. Whereas angels, which is just a fancy term for people that are high net worth individuals or individuals that want to invest into people and people in their businesses, they might have a different criteria set. So I think that's where it plays nicely with social ventures, where you may find some of those investors that are saying, okay, well, look, I have a little bit of money that I'm willing to put towards supporting a company. And because yours is not just a business, but in fact, it's a business that I think can be successful and actually deliver something that's great for the world, it kind of gives you that extra edge. And I certainly found that in our case. And we did have a number of angel investors, which is how we funded our company beyond the founders also writing our own checks.
Right.
Every time we were about to miss payroll. Yeah, it happened a lot. In our case, because we were working on a government program, kind of like we came up against a roadblock, which was the government program. And there were changes that happened which basically stalled our business for 12 months. And so at 12 months, we went through a period ourselves where we had to go from 35 employees down to 6 employees. We weren't able to raise any more external financing because there wasn't essentially the policy in place for us to actually run our business. So we certainly asked ourselves that question. And it was kind of, I guess, entrepreneurs' hope and optimism and dreams that it's going to happen. And sometimes that's what keeps pushing you forward.
So we face the same delays in our business, waiting for the government program to start issuing contracts. And in addition to those 2 entrepreneurial drive points you had, I think it might have been my stubbornness and insistence that I was on the right path. But I definitely, had some tough days where you're just like, I just don't know if this is the right thing. It wasn't supposed to be this hard, right? And but yeah, I mean, I had that stubbornness and that drive to keep going, and I believed in where we were going eventually. So I just needed to cultivate more patience ultimately.
I think one of the things for my experience is before we hired other staff, when it was just me, I could fail really easily. And when things weren't going the way it had to, I could quickly adapt. The scariest thing you can do as an entrepreneur, in my view, is hire staff, because then you're accountable for their livelihoods as well. And when I took the plunge and hired one other person, it was just one person, and the door-to-door sales model I talked about earlier wasn't working, we were getting to a point when I couldn't get to the next week's salary, and I was looking at just not paying myself and how can we cut some of the bills because I'm obligated and I feel responsible for paying their salary. And that's when I was pushed into a very interesting space around seeking investment where the investor could suddenly dictate the terms. Because I was desperate for the money. We were already in negotiations, but suddenly they could see that I needed it. And so though we have a very positive working relationship with that investor, the advantage was in their court. And so one of the pieces of feedback I'd give my former self is when you have the ability to, don't wait till you need the money to ask for it. Ask for the money when you don't need it. Because then you can dictate your own terms, you're not desperate, and if you don't get it, that's okay. Don't wait till the last minute because then it could really come back and hurt you.
Amy?
Yeah, I mean, starting a company is really, really tough. And I don't think I understood fully how tough it would be until I did it. So I think I always pretended like I empathized with founders before, and I was like, yeah, it's totally tough, I understand. Like I had no understanding. and so yeah, like there's points where there were like super low points where like, oh, we're gonna run out of money like real soon. and we were really fortunate to find like awesome investors who really believe in what we're doing. But yeah, like, I don't know, I guess I've been fortunate to work with my best friend, and she knows me really well. We've known each other since the age of 9. And so when I have a bad day, like I'll literally tell her, I'm like, oh, it's like, I'm like really low. And she's like, don't worry. And like, she'll like tell me a joke, really cheesy one, and pick me up. And likewise with her, like I will kind of do the same. And I think that's been really important for me, having a co-founder and someone who really knows me, and we know each other's strengths and weaknesses, and it's kind of helped us persevere. And I mean, that's been a huge thing. And then the second piece is just like, we really believe in what we're doing. And so, I mean, we could be making much more money probably. We're still really early on in the corporate sector, but we really believe in this. And so I think that also, like that, hope and desire and dream to build something really big, to have that impact, really means a lot to us.
Perfect.
I need to add one thing to that, and I think it is the importance, because you brought it up, of having that support network, because entrepreneurship is like, it's a crazy ride. And I wish the book that was written by Ben Horowitz called The Hard Thing About Hard Things, like was published before we started, because I would have had a better sense of what someone else would have gone through, kind of like journey. If you haven't read it, it's just, he walks through kind of like the honest discussion of all the really tough times you go through as being an entrepreneur. And certainly, within the tech community, there's, some concern about, some certain entrepreneurs, and you can go into some very dark places, and it can be lonely, and there might not be people that you can speak to, because it's kind of a unique, you're in a unique position where you can't go to your employees, sometimes you can't go to your board, your spouse might not understand everything, so it's like, well, who do you turn to? And do you get caught up in your own head? So
it's tough.
I think there is importance just to having and building a support network of perhaps could be other fellow entrepreneurs that you can kind of share ideas with.
I'll just jump in. I had a lot of trouble at first specifically with ZooShare, and it just had to do with people and how hard it is to really bring people on to something that's your vision, where you're trying to drive the bus, but you don't even have confidence every day that you're driving in the right direction. And if it doesn't turn out that they're the right people, it can be extra painful and extra difficult. And we had to go through some changeovers in board members in early days and work through that. And it was definitely tough. And it ultimately just taught me how much I have to really focus on my due diligence of people.
Yeah.
And it's not just my initial impression that I need to go on.
So if I can just speak to that with my experience, I think that philanthropy and not-for-profits and charity have a very important place in the world and dealing with some of the world's most daunting challenges. And so it's my view that they're not a sustainable approach, but they are great at solving quick problems. So let's say a humanitarian disaster, a tsunami, earthquake. That is where groups like the Red Cross, World Food Program, UNICEF can quickly adapt. They have the structure, they have the funding, and they have the resources to go in and provide immediate response. But then if that earthquake or tsunami has devastated the region, how do you then build up growth? The members of that community shouldn't be constantly relying on WFP or the Red Cross for food and for agriculture. And so how do you have the transition between immediate relief and then giving someone the strength to then get back to be self-reliant? And so that's where I feel the trade-off between not-for-profits and social business comes in.